to join us in the Braver Angels Forum. Monica is the author of I Never Thought of It That Way, a guide for how to stay fearlessly curious in dangerous divided times. It's a fabulous book. If you haven't read it, get it. She delivered the keynote address at the 2024 Psychotherapy Networker Symposium alongside Esther Perel and Bill Doherty. And her work has become a touchstone for anyone who's trying to help people bridge divides with courage, clarity, and care. Monica has spent years traveling the country, sitting down with people across the political spectrum and discovering what helps us reach out to each other when it feels hardest to do so. She brings a rare blend of journalistic insight, emotional intelligence, and practical wisdom. Her perspective is especially valuable for mental health care professionals who support clients navigating conflict, belonging, identity, and the emotional weight of our polarized culture. Today, she'll join Paul Norris, our co-host in the forum, for a fireside conversation that explores questions at the heart of our work. What unique role can mental health professionals play in rebuilding trust and social resilience? How can we better understand the psychology of polarization? What helps us stay grounded when conversations feel personal or emotionally charged? And what have moments of rupture and repair taught her about the conditions that make healing possible? Also, one thing about Monica that I learned when I attended the psychotherapy symposium last year was that she's a Mexican immigrant and dual US Mexico citizen. She lives in Seattle with her husband and two children and is the proud liberal daughter of conservative parents. We're grateful to have her with us. We're grateful to have all of you here for this important conversation. We will reserve at least the last 15 minutes today for your own questions and feedback. Otherwise, we hope that you will enjoy a conversation with Monica and Paul. Take it away.
So, Monica, I've really been looking forward to this. Actually, you and I have never actually really had that much of a conversation, although we've traveled in the same circles a lot. So I think this should be fun. So here we go. There are a pre-selected list of questions, but you don't know which ones I'm going to ask you or in what
Yeah.
order. And I thought there was this one that just really jumped out to me. Um, have you noticed distinct patterns in how liberals and conservatives seek belonging, signal loyalty, or experience exclusion?
Mm.
And what does that reveal about how to reach each group?
Mm. Yeah, first of all, hi, and thanks, Linda, and thank you, Paul, and hi, everyone. It's really great to be invited to this conversation with this lens. I really appreciate it. I get a version of this question pretty frequently, and I hesitate to name patterns because I'm afraid I'm reifying something. People see me as some kind of expert on this, and so, see, Mónica Guzmán said that conservatives are always like this and liberals are always like that. So with that disclaimer, I do think there are some patterns, and the way that I would give maybe the one that I find most important to this group is that I think both sides have different ways of fearing that they might be seen as a monster. I see conservatives being afraid that in those spaces where liberal culture has been dominant, that those spaces will be judgmental of them as monsters because of the views that they hold or the ways that they speak or whatever it happens to be. On the left, there's, I think, a really powerful undercurrent of nobody wants to do harm. So what does that mean? And you could be called a monster by someone else on the left for having done harm in some way. So I don't know exactly how current that is. I've been observing that for some years now. It's a pattern, but I'll stress the piece about everyone's afraid of being seen as a monster or accidentally being a monster, being judged as a monster in one way or another. And maybe one more thing I'll say is that I don't think this is exclusive to conservatives at all. This is all over the place. But I have sensed a pattern that conservatives feel a little more inherent confidence in things like family relationships than liberals do. Like they seem to have more of a home there. And so I think when conservatives face estrangement because of politics from someone on the left, they can be a little more sidetracked. Like, how did that even happen? So I'll leave it at that for now. What do you make of that, Paul? Anything you want to add?
Well, I just love that you went straight to fear. You know, we so often mask our fears rather than being open about them. And when we can talk to each other, one of the deepest kinds of conversations I have found that we can have with each other is when we get to the point where we can quite honestly talk about what our fears are. That's when we get to the heart of things. So
I completely agree.
I just love that you went there, you went there right away.
And I'll connect fear to pain because I find that one thing that allows healing and bridging to happen in the really hardest moments is when people see each other's pain. So it's about you don't dismiss the fears, you try to hear them out, you don't hide them, and you make it somehow safe enough in your connection to be able to do that. But when people see each other's pain, that's when there's a lot of transformation.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting, the word safe, we on the right have gotten a little bit of an aversion to the word safe because safe is usually doesn't mean safe for us. So I find, the word a little bit problematic, but
Hmm.
so I usually jump to like things like comfortable. But yeah,
Yeah.
I
That's a very good point. And it's funny you say that because I've been avoiding it for just that reason. And only recently have I decided that it might be okay to start using it again, merely because I can't think of a more apt description for psychological safety than the word safe. So I don't know how to get it out of that loaded place, but I've also never heard anyone say what you've just said, which is going to stick with me, Paul. Thank you for the I never thought of it that way moment, that it doesn't feel safe for us, that many conservatives hear that word and think that it's a safety for you, but not for me. And therefore I can't see that. And I think that's fascinating.
how do you say safe in Spanish?
Seguro.
Seguro.
Mm-hmm. Or sano y salvo, but usually seguro. Seguridad, which is actually in Spanish, it's security and safety are kind of folded together. And I find security to actually be a more useful grounding concept than safety. If we can get a little rhetorical for a minute, I find that when we talk about safety, it's as if we are bringing up the specter of danger. It's like we're validating that in a conversation, you can be in danger. And I want to question that whole thing. Is it really true that in a conversation where people are just saying words, you can be in danger? Because when I use safety, it brings up its opposite, and that's danger. So in a way, I prefer Spanish because seguridad is security. That I think is more apt.
Yeah,
So I kind of wish the language would change.
yeah, yeah. Well, sadly, people can feel insecure, pain, danger from mere words. Um, but we could spend the rest of the conversation
Yeah.
on that.
Yeah,
Let me ask
easily.
you another question. So in your experience, which political triggers most reliably activate fight, flight, freeze, or fawn responses? And how do you recognize these reactions in real time?
Yeah. When I hear the phrase political triggers, I I basically take that as uh, some package of words that are just reliably it can be relied on to spark reactions. So to me, the ones that most reliably activate these trauma responses in people and that are most worth paying attention to because they can be so subtle and quick and sometimes hard to notice is about language. Um, I find that it's important for us to remember that language is a technology that language is our best technology for trying to transmit meaning between people. But meaning is in people. It's not in words. I mean, we've created words in a dictionary to assign meaning to words, sure. But when one person tries to convey their meaning to another, they are using the technology of language to try to do that in the best way they know how. And one of the issues with the technology of language in a divided time is that language begins to evolve according to its use. And when there's siloed communities using language in different ways, you end up in a way with different languages. So where we see the triggering is in these partisan loaded phrases that are secure, seguros, right, for one group, but are danger for another. And they're a red flag, or they remind someone of their trauma. They remind someone of something that they have seen in the media, or that they ascribe to something they've experienced in their lives. And it can happen with all kinds of terms. I'll say that for me, as someone on the left, when I read in the news the term illegal alien, being sort of casually used, and as an immigrant as well, I have experiences of being at a national conference of journalists where we passed a resolution to advise all journalists to stop saying illegal alien and instead say undocumented immigrant, right? But it's part of how the culture war figures out value tensions is through language. And I think when we can approach it curiously, we'll see that those tensions in language just reveal our fault lines, and we can look at it that way. But another one for me is the term Latinx. When I see the word Latinx written down, oh, I just get mad. I just don't like it. I just don't like it. I haven't liked it for years. And so it's an immediate trigger. And I want to, I want to fight it as soon as I can. I want to be like, hey, I don't like that term. Or I want to fly from it. If I see it in the statement of some organization, I will like that organization a little bit less, right? I don't know if I do much fawning, but I could freeze if it's being used in a way that's kind of too upfront to me. So, but to sum up, I think that anything in language, any loaded phrase is just, it's especially threatening to the productivity of conversations because it can trigger these responses so quickly that people almost don't even notice. They've just become more emotionally activated and they don't know why. And it takes a level of consciousness. So the second part of that question was, how do you even recognize these reactions in real time? And I think you can't recognize the reactions in real time unless you are paying attention, even when you are not in a heated disagreement, to how you feel about certain terms. When you do that, then that consciousness, that radar will follow you into the heated disagreement, and you'll know that you're suddenly raising your volume, not necessarily because what they're saying is so absurd, but because they used a term that you associate with things that you don't like. And if you can notice that, then you can slow it down and become more curious about, okay, what's really going on, and separate those things out.
Yeah, as we learn from brain science, if you can take a breath and not have the amygdala drive your response, and get to the prefrontal cortex and actually be able to see your own reaction, and not totally identify with it. Um, yeah, an ongoing challenge, isn't it?
It is. It is. No, and you've kind of named it. So much of it is, are we able to have the wherewithal to peel off of these patterns and habits and energies that have become kind of like, again, habitual in us. And unless we observe ourselves, we're just going to get carried away by whatever those patterns are. And we're just going to wake up going, what did I do? What did I say?
I'm curious, what personal practices in your own life, whether they be spiritual, whether they be psychological, even physical, what practices have enabled you to get to the point where you can actually approach conversations like this with curiosity rather than reactivity?
Yeah, a few years ago, I would have given a different answer. these days, meditation has become really important. I used to be squeamish about admitting that. It's become really important. I meditate every morning. Even if all I have is 5 minutes, I'll do the 5 minutes. And I'm, yeah, frankly, studying some of those practices that have been around a long time that help people find a sense of grounding. I find that, again, in our divided time where there's contention between groups of people and whose problems are more important, and you belong over here, no, you belong over here, no, I should belong over there. This need for internal coherence and stability is so big, but it's under constant assault in the rhythms of our daily life, from the expectations that we should all be on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok all the time, just being like knocked sideways by this information overload that can hack into our psychology, to the fact that our economy is built on our attention. And so everywhere now, even in, our cars are freaking smartphones now. It's crazy. So we need to have a way to find that stability. And there are these ancient practices for doing just that. But there's some new practices too. I think it's still the same goal. Can you recognize that that if that person doesn't change, you are okay? I can forget that when everything gets really messy and stressful. As a journalist for many, many years, once I start reading 2 articles, it's like a Pringles can. Once you pop, you can't stop. And I go to 10, 15, 20 articles, and then my mind is consumed by whatever it is I'm outraged by, as if it's my life. And it's not my life. So the other key practice for me, and I learned this after the Charlie Kirk assassination, which really knocked me aside, was I need to turn the volume up on the presence in my local life with real people who love me and who I love. And there will be voices in my head telling me, no, you need to read another article. Read that thing somebody sent you about how the world's on fire. It's like, that's not going to help me put it out. It's not.
Yeah. To actually be able to allow another person to be different from oneself in really fundamental ways, and being totally okay with that and not needing to change them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think that's so key.
Yeah. So along those lines, I know a little bit about your relationship with your parents. You've talked about that, and I wonder, how large a part has your relationship with your parents, influenced where you have come to?
I think it's really big. I think it's really, really big. So for those who may not be aware, I'm in a politically divided family. I think Linda, you introduced me as the proud liberal daughter of conservative parents, which is always fun to see what different groups' reactions is to that line. They remain a really important kind of homecoming for me. And what I mean is, I can see what's going on in the world, and I can follow my own anxieties and fears and projections and hopes and dreams and all of it to some distant lands. But when I talk with them, there's just this feeling that we begin at the beginning, that we're at something really real together. So the fact that we can get to that place while voting for completely different people and holding completely different political views is part of how I know that bridging big divides is possible. So yeah, and I would say that since I published the book, which was almost 4 years ago now, our discussions are becoming even more intense. And that's because I think we're picking up some more skills, some more confidence. And so we're going to even darker places together. And what's really neat about that is when we go to those darker places, it's like we both bring flashlights, that there's certain things that only get illuminated if both our flashlights are aimed at them. And so we both aim them in those dark corners, and like more of the world just comes up. It's really cool. I'm doing that with my friend Travis Tripodi, who is conservative and also in Braver Angels, and April Lawson, who many of you know. But it all started with my parents. They're like the beginning and the end of this, because it's the deepest relationship I have other than my husband. And we haven't seemed to find the end of the mystery of our difference and the end of what it can reveal to us. And we seem to be getting, turning the heat up higher and still withstanding it.
I'd really like to hear you tell this story, but I can tell you, I mean, this brought tears to me when you talked about the issue of like withholding children from their grandparents. Could you tell that story here?
Yeah. So this was election day 2020, and I was over my parents' house to watch the election returns with them as a kind of morbid test of whether we could survive, which we did. And I went for a walk with my dad because, the returns come in slow, and we're on the West Coast and it takes forever anyway to get the first returns. And he has a way of communicating that is kind of understated. I'm obviously fairly out there, and he's really not. So he tends to communicate emotional truth, I think, mostly through story. So he told me about how he had heard from people from conservative parents whose liberal kids had basically told them, because of politics, you're not going to see your grandkids. And he just told me that, and he said, sometimes I'm afraid that would happen to us, which I was surprised to hear in that moment. I was surprised to hear that was an insecurity he held. And I immediately, without even thinking about it, I just said, never, Dad, that's never going to happen to us. And I don't know quite where that came from. It was very quick. It sort of came faster than I could think of it, so was it a commitment? Was it a promise? Was it an ambition? Was it a felt known truth? I can't say for sure. I'm still very confident about it. But I know that this is a place where a lot of heartache has bloomed for a lot of families. And so I don't treat it as some kind of, oh yeah, we figured it out. I just made him a promise and that's it. I don't think it's that easy.
The thing that brought tears to my eyes was I am imagining you had that conversation with him in Spanish, and the word nunca,
Nunca. Yeah.
nunca with
Nunca.
finality.
Yeah.
That's what really brought tears to my eyes.
Yep. No, and I'm glad he has told me that. I mean, the reason that ended up in the book is he's told me how much that meant to him.
Yeah.
To hear me say that so quickly.
Yeah. Well, as a grandfather myself,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I can truly appreciate that. Is there some part of your work that you would just really like to highlight for therapists?
Hmm. Well, I think that therapy is so important right now for a couple of reasons I want to highlight. One, there is a loneliness epidemic, and more of us, despite supposed technologies that connect us all, are finding ourselves feeling isolated or being physically isolated. We know through research that fewer people have close friends, and the number of close friends are less. We know that mental health indicators show, especially in young people, an increase in anxiety. Hard to say whether that's sort of more because of self-report or some actual change, but it does seem like there's a lot of evidence that we live in a time where people are just more anxious. I think it's also really important because when we're so divided, The temptation is to think the same thing that couples would think who are entering marriage therapy. They're the ones to blame, the other half of the couple. And as Bill Doherty has said beautifully, he has said that, in marriage therapy, transformation starts to happen when each member of the couple looks in the mirror, right? So if you combine that truth of our loneliness, and rising anxiety with the truth of our division, and the fact that our division is fueled by misperceptions that keep us away from being able to really look at ourselves well, I think what that adds up to is more Americans need help having more productive conversations with themselves. We, in the bridging space, we tend to jump right to how to have better conversations with other people. But you can't have a great conversation with someone who's different from you if you're not also able to have a good conversation with yourself. When your reactions come up or what your patterns happen to be is so important. And if those are not somewhat accessible to you, you will be caught up. You will be more likely to be caught up in all of these forces that are running away with our souls, right? Like the outrage industrial complex and all of that. I think it takes a certain kind of security and fortitude born of self-understanding to be able to withstand the slings and arrows of our media landscape, let alone relationships and stereotypes and ruptures, all of that, and dysfunctions. Just the media landscape requires that. So I think, I don't know, I'd like to offer that framing on therapists, that you are helping Americans have better conversations with themselves so that they can be capable of having better conversations with anyone else, especially anyone who could trigger, threaten, make them feel a certain way. And it is all too easy in that therapy room to, I don't know, accidentally maybe contribute to a more polarized landscape. When certain people share certain stories and are responded to in certain ways. So I don't know. I worry about that. I think therapists are so needed right now, but what I see is a trend of them being viewed in more politicized ways, and we need to be really careful about that.
So, by the way, we're way off script.
Okay. It's fine.
So that leads me to ask, what should therapists themselves do? You're talking about, like how it's important that somebody can have a conversation with themselves.
Yeah.
Is there a message here potentially of humility?
Yes.
And for therapists themselves to be able to have that conversation with themselves and to be able to allow for difference to exist in the room without it being threatened.
I think that's huge. I think it's huge. It's funny, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal recently that somebody sent me, and it's an opinion piece. And the headline was "Politics Makes for Bad Therapy." And I'll read real quick one of the paragraphs in here. When therapists gave up neutrality, polarization stopped being a condition to address and became the cure they dispensed. Some therapists label progressives as stuck in woke fantasies. Others shame conservatives for bigoted thinking. Patients leave angrier, more rigid, and more distrustful of their neighbors. Disagreement becomes harm. Dissent becomes trauma. Difference becomes danger. That is not therapy. It's indoctrination dressed up as care. And I was like, woof, zinger. So I think we have to be careful. The language of trauma, that people have talked about the creep of that. Is safety the goal to such an extent that you just need to disconnect yourself from everyone who makes you uncomfortable? To what extent do therapists sort of affirm people's underlying sense of what they need? And to what extent do therapists challenge them to try to endure some discomforts and differences? I think that, anyway, but you named it. I think that therapists are not immune to this. And I have to tell you all, as a word of warning, I think what's happened to journalists is coming for therapists. So please be careful, because journalists for too long told themselves, we are immune from polarization. We are immune from that impacting how we do our work. We're super professional. We're really smart. We've got our degrees. We've been doing what we're doing and it's worked really well. We know the truth and we're fine. But are we? I think we need to be extremely humble. All of us who purport to help people understand themselves and society, because therapists and journalists are in the same mission on that. We have to be extremely, extremely careful.
Makes me think about discomfort. And I don't think any of us ever get to the point where we like discomfort. The natural human instinct is to make ourselves comfortable. And yet, does this work inherently involve discomfort? And would you like to say something about how do we learn to live with that discomfort and make it a natural part of our lives? And in some weird sense, learn to love and be comfortable with discomfort.
Yeah. Esther Perel, one of her famous quotes is something like, relationship issues are not problems to be solved, they're paradoxes to be managed. Something like that. And I think that is about discomfort. Sometimes our first instinct is to, we're problem solvers, we're productive, we're a hammer, everything's a nail. And we're bringing a technocratic ideology to our relationships. And that's, interesting, but it can be brutal. And, roping that question into the last one, Paul, I would also say that therapists these days need to be wary and curious and humble in the face of ideologies that are not political per se, but that are impacting the kind of substrate, the universe that therapy operates under. So, for example, at the Psychotherapy Networker conference where I was on stage with Bill and Esther, just before that session, they were playing the song Flowers by Miley Cyrus. I can buy myself flowers, say things I don't understand, say things you don't understand. I can take myself dancing, hold my own hand. I can love me better than you can. That is a song about what's a very popular ideology these days about self-care, about self-reliance, that basically says you don't need other people because other people can be so annoying and they can frustrate you and they can hold you back from being your full self. So it's in the air all around us, that particular ideology. And it's usually not seen as an ideology. It's usually seen as, boy, we are so much smarter about boundaries and about these kinds of ways that we all need to take care of each other. I think this impacts women most of all. I've certainly felt those messages. And Gabby Kearns of Braver Angels shared with me, like, she is singularly brilliant on this point and how it affects young women. But anyway, that's just one example. It's just, therapy language has been brought into that sense of ideology, right? That because of my, triggered trauma responses, the discomfort that I face with this person who is different from me in this way is just not something that is letting me show up as my whole self. So we're done. We need to cut that out. That's the way that I can take care of myself, that I can be my best self. It adds up as a theory. It does. And I don't know that it has enough of a counter out there, to ensure that it's got some nuance to it. I think right now that there are some people who are taking that too far. So anyway, I forget what your question was, but that's where I took it.
That brings up so many things. I'm thinking about the Sartre quotes, hell is other people,
Right.
and yet heaven is other people.
Exactly.
And hell is not having other people, actually.
Yeah.
But specifically, you mentioned, what things are like now for young women. And, I think, probably most of us are aware of the statistics about, the incredibly high percentage of young liberal women, who have some kind of a psychiatric diagnosis.
Mm.
And, as a red on the one hand, I can kind of maybe chuckle a little bit, but really not. How are things particularly difficult for women? And, as I ask you this, I think about, one of my granddaughters, who's 14, and she's going through some really tough times right now, which is strange, because I mean, she agrees, how lucky she is, functional family, security, and yet, she's going through some real problems. What is going on with
I
young
mean,
women from a place of
yeah.
compassion and love?
I'm not the expert on this. I can point to those who are and have what I think are compelling arguments. Jonathan Haidt has a really compelling argument. I devoured his book, Anxious Generation, about how social media and some of its pressures can impact young women in particular. And I do find it really compelling. Um, there's also, some theories about external locus of control versus internal locus of control, and how young women are, again, I think this tracks, but I don't have the data, right? But young women may be more vulnerable to sort of seeing things as having an external locus of control, meaning I can't do anything about this. It's the world that's doing this. And the world is doing this. It's making me feel powerless. And there's so much pressure. And because the world is this way, I don't know how to lift myself up anymore. I think that there's a class-based thing too, with a lot of young women and the pressures of I don't know, education and the horrible kind of dog eat dog kind of competitiveness that there is out there sometimes. I think that parents, this generation of parents is far more involved with their kids, and sometimes I think that passes on some pressures that kids are not necessarily ready for and that they start to internalize really young. I've talked, actually, I remember this one woman at a private high school in the Northeast that I went and spoke with. It was their parents' weekend, and so they had me do like a fireside chat Q&A that was off the record just with parents. And one of the moms was telling me basically through tears that, she thought she was raising a really like informed daughter, who knew about what was really wrong in the world. The mother is herself very far left and progressive, and so took her to protests and did all these things. And then she was telling me through tears that now her daughter like won't talk to the grandmother who's conservative and doesn't know how to talk to anybody else and is always stressed out and seems depressed. And I've read a bit about that sometimes, like, maybe parents desire to kind of bring their kids along to the realities of the world ends up passing on so much of the stress and putting so much burden. And when I go to colleges, it is insane how much these students think the weight of the world is on them. It's just, and a lot of women are showing up to these kinds of classes. So that's my quick, who knows, quick ramble on that. Oh,
Yeah.
and one more thing, I suppose, is like we're still living in a kind of a post-feminist age where, oh yeah, women like have the family, take care of the family, also have the career and be really, really dang good at it, do it all at the same time, be better than your peers because it's super competitive, and ugh. So that's been going on for a while.
And so this is certainly a topic that, that you can address, though. You as a mother, and also an author, and, I have some vague idea of how busy your life is. I mean, good Lord, Monica, how do you do it all?
um I mean, yeah, taking that question at face value, I am someone who needs fuel. And it's very important to me that I get to meet real people and have real conversations. I think if I were like in a little hobbit hole writing all day without connection, real connection to people, I'd go crazy. There's no way. I could probably be productive. No, I have no interest in that. I really need to balance it with actual conversations with actual people, including the one-on-one stuff with people who know me well and the occasional stuff with strangers. um I don't know. Paul, it's hard. I'm sure it's hard for you too. I think, I don't know if this happens to you, but I go to some places and people ask me what I do and they think I'm absolutely crazy. Yeah. It's tough.
Well, I doubt that my life could be more different than yours. I mean, I'm retired and things are really pretty easy.
Yeah, well, that's good.
What question should I have asked you? And I think we'll go to the audience maybe after this one.
Yeah.
But what question would you have liked me to ask you that I did not?
Mm-hmm. Um, well, let's see. I had seen in the list of favorite questions one about specific conversational moves or micro behaviors that I've seen reliably soften defensiveness and open the door to genuine engagement. And in a way, my whole work is that question. But I've got some interesting kind of new answers or fresh ones that I want to share. One comes from my friend Shira Hoffer, who runs an organization called the Viewpoints Project. It's amazing. She works in colleges and schools, and she's very young herself. But she has a really good technique that I've absolutely seen work, and it took hearing it from her to recognize it. To when you ask questions in the course of a disagreement, try not to ask questions that begin with "don't you," and try to ask questions that begin with "do you." I think that's really smart. So it's one of those subtle linguistic things. Like, don't you think that blah 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 is just gonna be less non-judgmentally curious than, so do you think that da 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 da? Um, so yeah, it's like confirming something or bringing up something on its face rather than like reminding them of the opposition to how you would have them think. I think that one's really good. I think another one is, I think so much of a conversation that softens in its course um, is about what people can demonstrate to each other live in the moment. So when somebody vents or becomes angry, will the other person respond in kind? We tend to be mimetic on tone. So, if you get animated, I'll get animated, and it goes back to that awareness of things where if you build that internal security, then whatever storm the other person needs to blow in order to say or try to convey their meaning to you doesn't need to actually begin a storm in you. It could, it might, maybe it should. But I've seen that happen where somebody's angry and somebody says a thing, and then the other person listens to it and then responds in just the same tone that they had before, but with words that communicate that, oh yes, they were listening and they heard that anger and they recognize the anger, but they don't need to match the storm. I think that's amazing, and it demonstrates to the other person that there's something that's okay about being angry when I need to be. I think a lot of us hold back a lot of the honest disagreements because we're afraid I'm going to get angry, they're going to get angry, but somebody's going to get angry, and then it's all going to go out of control. But it doesn't need to, and sometimes we really need anger. And maybe I'll say one more. Let me see. Oh yeah, this one I think is really important. It's come up a lot for me lately, which is, can we build the skill to not look for everything in the form of words and language? Can we build that skill? There's this podcaster named Dylan Marin, and his podcast is Conversations with People Who Hate Me. He's a gay man. He's had it for years, and he did a TED Talk at some point. And one of the points he makes, so he ends up, some of the folks who, said horrible things about him on the internet, he'll have them on his podcast. And it's literally conversations with people who hate me. And one point that he made in an interview I thought was so brilliant is he says, the person's on my podcast, we're having a conversation. It's gentle, it's respectful. And this is a person who had said horrible things about me or to me online or whatever. And he's like, they don't need to tell me the words, I'm sorry, for me to know that they're sorry. They're here on the podcast with me. They're treating me with civility. They've taken that. I don't need to hear those words. And I think sometimes we create little rules. Well, until I need to hear you say that. It's like, do you though? Or are you just now hijacking? Are you taking more power than you actually need? Can we look for those cues from each other? Sometimes the dynamic just changes all on its own. And if you can detect those shifts, you don't need certain words to know that you're now on another level, that you've calibrated on something, that you see something in each other. And boy, that changes everything. So I will leave it at that.
Yeah, to me, that's being in tune with your body. and being, your body knows that something has shifted.
Yeah.
If you could just kind of, like calm the mind. You mentioned anger, and I think that is a really big deal. I think there's such a thing as constructive anger. And, we're just not really aware of that. We don't know how to use anger in a productive way
Yeah.
and how to allow anger without being afraid of anger per se. As long as the anger, does not lead to actual violent actions, which you can make that separation.
Exactly. And once you do, people are unlocked. When people feel like, again, here comes a word, if people feel safe enough to exhibit their anger, to say the words attached to the emotions that they feel are really there, then if you think about it, that just gives the other person more data about what's really in you, if you look at it that way. And that's a more complete conversation than one that only had the words. So this is really about how do we build our capacity to hear not just the words, but the emotion that comes with them. And again, if we remind ourselves that if that person doesn't change, I'm still okay, those storms in them don't need to spin up storms in you. They don't need to. And you can have conversations with yourself about how you tend to react to other people's anger. And you can work on that in yourself, and model that for other people. And it's amazing when you've got even just 2 or 3 people in a group who are a little bit steadier, how that helps the entire group kind of allow people to be who they are. For example, I'll just tell you real quickly that yesterday I got so mad at my husband because we made a mistake on a flight reservation for the holidays. And I think it was his mistake. But more than that, I was angry at myself and him that we would have made such a stupid mistake. And it really was both our faults. It was. But I just had to let it out. What I try to do is I try to name it as I'm letting it out. Like, I'm so upset about this, and Jason goes, yeah, I can hear that. And then once we've given that exchange, he kind of knows not to take it personally. And it really changes everything because it feels like I don't have to hide from him. Who wants to hide from their own, spouse? So that's a hard thing to get to with everybody. But, I got fire. Fire can come out.
As just kind of like a final note, I will say, by the way, Monica, I do not feel the least bit threatened by the difference between you and I.
Yay! That's so good, Paul. And same. That's pretty cool, isn't it?
Okay, I think it's time for Linda to take questions from the group.
Okay. I just wanted to make a quick comment about something you said that I think has been so helpful for me to recognize. It took me a long time to get there, but that you don't have to start you don't have to start a storm in yourself when somebody else is upset or distressed with you. And I came across a saying not too long ago that really stuck with me, which is the person who hits back is the one who starts the fight.
Yeah.
And I think that's true. And something that I found really helpful as well.
Sure. Monica, I enjoyed our conversation on Instagram, and it prompted me to finally actually read your whole book because I just had read excerpts, so I have finished the book.
It's so fun.
And based on conversations today, it seems to me that self-care can very easily turn into self-centeredness and self-absorption. And where do you observe altruism and sacrifice celebrated in the current culture anywhere? It's hard. It seems hard for me to find, but I feel like we're missing that. What are your observations on that?
I agree. Altruism is celebrated, I think, but it tends to come in packages that are built for the attention economy. And so that misses it kind of turns up the vanity a little bit and turns down a sense of sacrifice and compromise or grace, those kinds of things. But what was the second word you used? It was altruism and
sacrifice, self-sacrifice. I mean, all those words all that piece of language that start with self. Some are positive and some are like, why self-sacrifice is what you do when you get up with a toddler at 3 o'clock in the morning and 4 o'clock in the morning and 5 o'clock in the morning.
Well, let me steel man maybe what might be behind the reactive insistence on some of these self-care ideologies. So I take a step back and I think we're living at a time where we're still coming to grips with some movements and expressions about and from groups of people who feel that they have not had enough power and that they've been neglected and overlooked, including women, right, in general. But also you can look at race, you can look at classes, all this stuff, I think has been really pronounced over the last 20 years, really pronounced. So the idea of sacrifice to a person who is a member of a group that is trying to establish and assert in a new way that is newly allowed by a new conversation its own power is going to fall a bit flat. There's a tension between, is this sacrifice weakness or is it strength? And I would agree with you that I don't think there's enough conversation meeting the first conversation about that. I think that there is some conversation on that. It's just so divided. It's like across a barrier, across a wall. I'm even hearing about, more of that coming up on the right, but it's not coming on the left because of our polarization. It's being attacked from the left. Like I think of the trad wife meme, for example. But who knows? But I think it's worth having understanding and empathy for where it's coming from. I think a lot of people, individuals, young people, and then add any identity that seems, under threat, are thinking now is the time for me to assert my own power. It's up to me. And I can't let anyone tell me what my obligation is or what my power needs to be or make my choices for me, because it's really important that I stand up for these things. So I think there's a underground current of all of that, but I don't think it's serving us. I don't think it's serving us at all. Maybe primarily because Miley Cyrus says, I can love me better than you can. That kind of isolation is not peace. It's not joy. It's not happiness. It's not fulfillment. And we can tell ourselves that it has to be, that we'll figure this out. We really can be our own on our own. And I just don't think we can. And I don't think that these particular ideologies about power have solved the piece about how we stay whole together. So it doesn't mean that the ideologies about power don't have a lot of really good points, but they have not solved this other piece. And that I think is one of the tragedies of our polarization, because left and right both contain pieces of this puzzle and they need to be together, to be talking to each other about.
Thank you, Linda. Hi, Monica. Thank you so much. I was thinking about, you talked right off the top when you talked about fear, and then the mom who's telling you in tears how she sort of infused what she thinks are her values in her daughter through her sort of sense of fear. Then back to your emotional responses and then having an awareness of it, and then back to your meditation. So I'm curious how you connect those three and how perhaps they've just even how I meditated for a while, but I've gone away from it, but you've definitely piqued my desire to go back. How have you found meditation, and what did you introduce it for? Did you seek it to cool the temperature between you and your father or your family? Just curious how those three ideas kind of connect.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. I went to India for a month last year to visit friends, but also because I was really deeply curious about some Eastern philosophies, because what I had read from them told me, wow, I think this has some real wisdom for our relationship with ourselves, that can feed a more enriching relationship with the world, that can get rid of the delusion of separation, for example. Because, all of division rests on what I think is a spiritual delusion that we are so separate to begin with. So, I got curious and I went into it for that. But I came for that. I stayed for the incredible ways that it's helped me come back from moments of real rage, real anger, real preoccupation with various things in my life. I don't know, but usually it's conflicts within my family of four, my two children and my husband, or really the chief one is me and myself, my own expectations, my own pressures, things like that. And it's helped me be a better parent. I can't even tell you how much. because I get to, I will meditate in the middle of the day if something really activated me.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell because I'm trying to do something else. It's still here and it's still boiling and I haven't given it attention. So I will sit, even if it's 5 minutes, I'll set a timer. I will sit. I've done this, like there was a party I was supposed to be at, and instead of just going to the party, I realized I was a certain state of mind. I meditated in the car before coming in because I knew if I came in the state that I was in, I was just going to be irritated and irritable. And boy, it helped. And there's not enough time on this call to talk about some of the things that really helped me. But I'll tell you this. Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a great Buddhist teacher, talks about a wonderful way of non-judgmentally observing your emotions so that you can see what's underneath them and their nature, is to, kind of treat them the way a mother holds a crying child. There's my anger. Let me listen to my anger, and I will actually hear my petty voices say the things that they want to say. And it's but I'm the mother. I love the baby. I'm the mother and I'm the baby. And I need to hold that baby to myself as it cries. And it's just the weirdest thing that just visualizing that, just, I don't know, it softens everything and the anger starts to subside because I'm looking at it and I'm acknowledging the complexities under what's going on. I'm holding compassion for myself and for whatever other person is there. I'm inviting humility to show me that it's probably not all that person. It's me too. Two takes two to tango. There's so many practices that I'm doing that have really helped me.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. Larry, I see your hand up next. Go right ahead.
Yes, hi. Thank you very much, Monica. I've heard a lot about you, and good to spend some time together. And we have a great Buddhist center here in Wallingford. I live across the street from, so
Cool.
in terms of meditation. What I really struggle with is I don't just personally, and I don't think polarization comes from people disagreeing on having more parks or fewer parks, or having a more robust safety net or a weaker safety net or foreign policy. I think the polarization is when I see what I think of it as real cruelty, like what's happening with people being snatched off the street, or Russell Voigt or somebody said, we want federal employees to be terrified. We want them. I mean, that and violence and untruth, speaking things that you know to be untrue. And then the other,
Do you have a
what's wrong with that?
question, Larry,
What's
for
wrong with
Monica?
that? So
Okay.
that's what I say. It's not over policy. It's where we disagree over basic moral positions.
Mm-hmm.
And so what do you think about? I don't really want to sit and discuss.
Yeah.
You
Well, I think
kindness
you're right. I think that what makes these things difficult is not actually the content of the disagreement, but the degree to which we think something truly wrong is happening, or that something truly wrong is being tolerated, because there's an enormous dissonance that comes up in ourselves, and it can have layers. It can have all the way from I need to do something, I don't know what to do, I feel powerless, I cast my vote or I did my thing and I lost and here we are and like I don't like it, or this person that I really wish wasn't in charge is, or this policy that I wish hadn't won did, or whatever. It's just so what to do with that moral disagreement. What's coming up for me right now, just as you say all this, is I think that there are different places to aim the transformative power of bridge building, this work that brings us together. And when I look at things like some of the things you mentioned, I have my very intense feelings about how ICE is treating undocumented immigrants in this country. And when I look at that, I don't look at that as being a place where bridge building is going to be effective. I look like upstream. Like I see so much of that as being poisonous reactionary symptoms of so much else. And one of the ways I try to stay sane is I try to tell myself, look, you're not an activist on some of the things that you could be an activist for. You're an activist upstream. You're an activist upstream to help make sure that we can see each other really well. And I, luckily, because I'm in bridge building, I do know enough to know that just because some things that I think are unconscionable are happening, doesn't mean that everybody who supports the overall policy wants those unconscionable things to happen. And many people who agree with the policy also agree with some of my takes on those things. And that helps me remember that the policy is being carried out, through people in power and these sorts of systems. But the people ultimately in power is all of us. And what we accept and what we don't accept relies on our own conversations with each other. So that it just makes me double down on this work, but to double down on it upstream, because I'm just not sure. I think there's a different set of tools that meet, what's going on the ground. And I'm working on this other thing.
Thank you, Larry.
Monica, I was really interested in the conversation that you were having with Paul about the use of the word like safety and safe space. And I feel like I think about that a lot sometimes when I'm in the room with a client or navigating like an interaction with a client, and I feel myself also straying away from using words like safe space or sometimes even trauma, because some of these words I feel like have become so popular like on the left, and I actually
Yeah.
am used to being in a lot of communities that are very leftist and would consider myself generally on that side, but it's like when I communicate with a client, I want them to hear like kind of just my voice and just my ideas and not like an ideology speaking to them. And I'm just wondering if you had any more thoughts on maybe how you navigate that or
Yeah.
just anything along those lines.
Yeah. No, this has really come up recently for me. I'm reading a book that comes from a perspective that's far more left than my own. I try to do that, across the spectrum here and there just to make sure I'm understanding and all these. And one of the things I realized about it that felt distancing to me, that started to clarify a lot in the universe of what you're saying, is there was so much jargon in it. There were so many concepts layered under concepts, layered under concepts. And I'm going, wait a minute, this is a problem too. So it's not just that there are phrases that become loaded. It's the fact that we need the phrases at all. It's the fact that somehow, everything needs to get, like, zip files on your computer, everything's condensed.
Yeah.
And so everything needs to get zipped up into these concepts. Because why? Well, because we're trying to communicate a lot of things very quickly. Okay, we have an information space that demands that. Okay, fine. But here's the cost. The cost is now you're going to start to give all these concepts, and few people can follow you all the way down those layers with full understanding, while those concept bundles have also picked up baggage along the way. So in other words, I think another strategy, other than just trying to avoid partisan loaded phrases, is just, can we just shed some concepts? So here's a great example. You mentioned safe space, right? I was in a conversation down in Oregon with some bridge building folks who gathered together, and somebody brought up, safe space. I've come up with a term, not I've come up with, I like the term brave space. Let's use brave space. And I was sitting there going, you know what, guys? I think the problem might be that we just think we need to name the space. Like, why do we need to name the space? Isn't that weird? Why don't we just say a space where people, can talk? Is it because we're always drafting the code of conduct in our heads? Is it because everything needs to be nailed onto a bulletin board and explained and expressed in a social media post? Can we just demonstrate goodwill to each other without having to make a glossary every dang time? Like, what is going on? I feel like, and especially going back to Eastern, Buddhist practices, every layer of concept takes us away from ourselves and the experience of actually living life together. So let's just get back down to the ground, And so I'm trying to do that too, is just explain what something is in plain language. Don't use the concepts.
I love it. Thank you.
Thanks. Hey, Monica, nice to meet you virtually here. Just for a bit of background, I'm a coach and I work with people on two subjects that are just amazing, which is politics and money. People that are triggered by politics is a special interest of mine, and being able to work with them. And I really love what you said about the way you frame questions. The don't you think kind of question puts people a bit on the defensive. And I found another great way of asking questions is get away from why do you think this? Or why are you doing this to using how and what instead of. And that just opens the field for people to be respond in a less defensive way in my experience.
Completely agree. And that's in my book as well, to ask how, not why, because you invite people to take you on a tour of something instead of putting them on the stand, and now they're on trial for something. So why, if it's all about exchanging reasons, people feel a little more attached, like how smart am I coming off? Are they going to judge me? But a how feels a little more open, a little more allowing of your actual story. And not to mention, I was looking again at this study that I've looked at a couple of times in the last few years, but about how moral political beliefs are best communicated through stories of experience rather than rational arguments. And this is like a study, so we know that experiences communicate and help people connect on moral arguments far, far better than trying to break it all down into some rational, logical thing all the time. So that's another thing that you get when you ask how. And then when you ask what, you're just painting a picture. Just paint me a picture of what you think.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of times we think we make logical decisions, but they're really based on emotions. We don't want to feel a certain way. So we'll make a decision and then we attach the logic to it on top.
Exactly. We cover for that, we make the rational cover. And then what's bad is when we make the rational cover and then we don't even see that there's an emotional underpinning. And whatever that emotional underpinning was is going to stay with us unless we observe it and see it.
Yeah. That leads me to my other question comment about the flowers in Miley Cyrus. And to use the title of your book, I never thought about it the way you presented it, which is the self-care movement has a detrimental side. And I can see that. In my own work, I use some of the triggering that happens in people, including myself, as like having a splinter in my finger. Like if someone else touches my finger and I have a splinter in it, it's going to make me feel pain. Now, there's two ways to handle that. I could wrap it and insulate it and now never allow anybody to touch it. And then it wouldn't hurt explicitly, but the pain would still be there and it's only going to get worse, right? So the way I interpret the Flowers song is that I can love myself better than you can. That's probably not even true because the person, whatever is causing the pain in them that comes out in the interaction with the other person is still there.
Yeah.
So looking at kind of I'm sure you can maybe acknowledge that there's a deeper work that can be done. That is maybe the true essence of self-care is the deeper work.
Well, I mean, to use your analogy, and I know we should move on, but to use your analogy, nobody wants to have the pain of pulling out the splinter. Pulling out the splinter hurts too, and it hurts a lot. And sometimes it's just easier to, I don't know. Yeah.
The first question is regarding anger. One of the things I tell clients is anger and asking are similar. They both start with A, so they're easy to remember. And often there's a need. There's a need that we can articulate so we can direct anger in a productive way. What do you recommend as a tool?
I teach about curiosity, and ultimately the lesson is all emotion is data. Can we receive that data from others and from ourselves? Unpack it, see what's behind it, learn, gain self-understanding, and gain understanding of others in the world. So when it comes to anger, it's the same exact thing. Can we get curious about anger? So the tip that I give is if you're hearing anger from someone else or you're hearing anger from yourself, can you turn it into data by acknowledging it and acknowledging it in the other person, but in a way that invites that anger to sort of explain itself safely? So if it's somebody else getting angry, you say, I had no idea that I can see how much this means to you. Can you tell me more?
Thank you. That's always so profound. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Any tips on, I find as a therapist, I get kind of tired of taking care of other people and longing for more intellectual conversations about psychology and politics. How did you get yourself into all these great conversations?
I don't know. I think I don't know. The way I tell that to myself is I just got an itch and started to scratch it. That's really where this started, and here we are. So if you're provoked by a certain intellectual mystery, scratch it.
All right.
Find other people scratching it and scratch it together. That's the best.
I like
Thank you,
that.
Katie.
Thank you.
But the question I want to ask is, do you have any thoughts on the role of sort of getting out of our silos by spending time with people who come from other, perspectives that aren't necessarily focused on directly addressing the political differences, right? Things like activities and sports and
I think that that's the organic way in which we have weaved a tapestry, including our differences for eons. That's how this works. When members of Congress were spending the entire week in DC instead of moving down to a much lower number of days and then flying home, they had their kids in the same baseball teams and their spouses were friends with each other and all of this. So activities where people who happen to have different politics are together are really important. It's, I think, more important now that an awareness of their political difference is in the room with them. And that's kind of tricky. I don't know if you went to the Braver Angels convention, but boy, it's magic because people wear lanyards, blue or red. And so you're going to the cafeteria, you're having lunch, and you just know that somebody silently, you just know that many people at your table don't agree with you. And it impacts how you speak and how you think about who's around you. And you start to notice the assumptions you carry with you all the time. It was at the convention that I realized, wow, when I assume I'm in constant blue spaces, I live in Seattle, I actually speak different. So I think an awareness of difference is really important. To give you like a creepy thought that, I don't know, I have over and over again, when you consider how much we supposedly hate each other across the divide, and we do, I mean, the research shows us, and how much fear there is across the divide, the fact that we drive on highways without having any clue who the people in other cars voted for, we are putting our lives on the line. You know what I mean? Like, but it just goes to show that there are so many places where we trust other people. We just do. We've built systems where we trust each other, and it's been fine. So one last thing I'll say is that if you haven't seen the Heineken ad from years ago, so look up like Heineken ad bridging or something like this. They made a beer, made a commercial that brings bridge builders to tears. And the principle that they illustrated is that when people who are very different do something together, they brought pairs of people together in a warehouse and they told them, you have to build this thing together. And they don't know what it is. They're just building it. So they start to build it. Before they had come into the warehouse, they had been interviewed on tape talking about things like, I'm just not okay, with trans people. I'm just not okay with it. And then another person is like, I'm trans, right? So they'll pair the trans person with the person who's not okay with trans people, and they'll start building this thing, and they don't know that they're different in this way. Turns out they built a bar. And so then they play them the tape of each other and what they think. And then they say, now it's up to you. Do you want to leave or do you want to sit and have a beer with this person? And of course, they show everybody sitting and having a beer because they've just spent time together ahead of learning that that person supposedly hates me, doesn't understand me, and they did it with a bunch of tough issues like abortion and everything else. So yeah, doing things together is really important. Building relationships that have nothing to do with politics makes the politics and the fault lines and the contrasts a whole lot easier to withstand.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good question, Dan. Yeah, thank you very much.